With that down, let's move on to main topic number 3. And our third main topic today gets submitted to us by Spencer S., who writes, "Hi, John. So," and this is going to be a big one, "NBC Universal just announced that they will be releasing Invisible Man, Emma, and The Hunt early on video on demand as early as this Friday, and on April 10th will release Trolls World Tour," that's the new Trolls movie, "on video on demand the same day it releases in theaters. However many theaters are actually open. It doesn't look like there's going to be any theaters open at that time. Anyway, this is something that is a reaction to a very unusual time for the industry. But my question is, should this be seen as just a temporary measure being taken by the studios, or should we be worried about the precedence that this may set for the movie industry? All right. Thanks a lot for sending that in, man. And yes, listen, there have been a number of dominoes that have fallen in the last 24 hours. Not only are we going to get The Invisible Man and The Hunt and Emma coming out on VOD far earlier than they're supposed to be, breaking the theatrical window, as it's called. But then after that, Birds of Prey is also coming to VOD early, as is the movie The Gentleman, one of my, if not my favorite movie of the year so far. At least it's right up there. But anyway, it all got started with this. When the CEO from NBC Universal made this announcement. Now, in asking the question about, is this just a temporary thing? I think this statement kind of addresses that a little bit. Given the rapidly evolving and unprecedented change, again, this is from the NBC Universal CEO, Jeff Shell. Given the rapidly evolving and unprecedented change to consumers' daily lives during this difficult time, the company felt that now was the right time to provide this option in the home as well as in theaters. NBC Universal will continue to evaluate the environment as conditions evolve and will determine the best distribution strategy in each market when the current unique situation changes. Universal Pictures has a broad and diverse range of movies, with 2020 being no exception. Rather than delaying these films or releasing them into challenged distribution landscape, in other words, no movie theaters are open, we wanted to provide an option for people to view these titles in the home that is both accessible and affordable. We hope and believe that people will still go to the movies in theaters where available, but we understand that for people in different areas of the world, that is increasingly becoming less possible. So, all right, that's the comment that kind of got this whole thing up and running from Jeff Schnell, again, CEO of NBC Universal. Rob, this is a huge thing.
Dude, we talked about this yesterday on the show.
Yeah.
And then it happened literally an hour later.
Yeah. With some really interesting and important moving pieces to keep in mind. Now, one of the things that I've always said was that, hey, maybe they should just put Black Widow direct on streaming. And I said, well, you can't really do that. It's financial suicide. You're not going to make nearly the amount. If you're the studio, you're not making nearly any money. Plus, you're screwing over the movie theaters. That's going to have to be something you have to deal with later and blah, 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 blah. And remember, the studios and the theaters do have these agreements called the theatrical window that states that if you put a movie in a movie theater, in one of their movie theaters, you have to guarantee that you will not release that movie on home video in any way, shape, or form for a certain period of time. That's what's referred to as the theatrical window.
Yeah.
Clearly, we'll start with NBC Universal. We'll talk about Birds of Prey and The Gentleman in a second. Clearly, NBC Universal is breaking those agreements and is breaking the theatrical window. However, there are a couple of extenuating circumstances, clearly. Number one of the things we said on the show yesterday, Rob, was that, okay, let's say the theaters kind of give their blessing to it and say you can go ahead and do that. Then that clears the way. It still raises the question about whether it's a wise thing to do in the case of something like a Black Widow, but they may do it. I reached out to somebody I still know over at AMC, and they by no means are speaking on behalf of the company, but the response I got was, there are currently no objections. So basically, now again, this person that I was speaking to is not the official spokesperson for AMC, so take that with a grain of salt. but the person I reached out to says the words that were used were there are currently no objections. So the movie theaters are not really objecting to this. That's the first hurdle. Because you put the movies in their theaters, you got to honor your agreements to keep a theatrical window, but apparently the movie theaters don't have an objection to this. The second interesting situation is this. Movie theaters right now are not in a position to honor their end of the agreement. The movie theaters' end of the agreement is we will show your movie in our theaters. Guess what? They just closed their theaters. Their theaters are closed. They're not in a position to honor their side of the agreement.
Right.
So number one, the theaters have no objection. Number two, they're not in a position right now anyway to honor their side of the agreement. So then let's get to the third part that we referred to yesterday. Is it financially smart for the studios when they could be making a lot more money in theaters? Here's the interesting thing about this scenario, Rob. The Invisible Man has been out for weeks. It's been out for weeks. And it just made... what, this weekend? 5 million? 5 million this weekend? It has already been out for weeks. It only made 5 million this weekend. So the theaters have no objections. They can't honor their side of the agreement anyway. From a financial point of view, there's really nothing to lose here for Universal to now, if the road is open, if the doors are open and the road is paved, that they can put these things out on streaming legitimately without violating agreements or good faith with their theatrical partners, then there's really no downside financially because this movie has already made most of the money, the vast majority of the money it was going to make in theaters anyway. The Hunt just opened, but The Hunt wasn't doing any business anyway. So from the studio's point of view, and from their perspective, there's no downside to them now taking The Hunt, which wasn't making any money in the theaters anyway, and put it out on streaming. There's no downside. Neither of these situations are a Black Widow situation, which is a bona fide blockbuster, hadn't played in theaters yet, hadn't gotten its money yet, blah, 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 and all that kind of stuff. Well, now let's look at what happened after that, Rob. Warner Brothers and STX. Both companies announced a movie that they're both putting out onto home video earlier. One being Birds of Prey, and one being The Gentleman, one of my favorite movies of the year so far. The problem here, Rob, is that Birds of Prey is in a similar situation of both The Invisible Man and The Hunt. It's no longer making money in theaters.
Right.
So again, the theaters have no objection. They can't uphold their side of the agreement anyway. And there's no financial downside to them putting out early because it wasn't making any money in the theaters now anyway. It had already done its run. And the same thing could be said of The Gentleman. The Gentleman was pretty much made all the money it was going to make. So theaters have no objection. They can't uphold their side of the agreement right now anyway. You might as well put it out on streaming early. I think, Rob, when you go back and look at Jeff Shell's statement again, it makes it pretty clear that this is not a policy shift in the relationship between theaters and studios. Jeff Shell seemed to make it very clear that this was very specific to our current circumstances. And very specific to our current circumstances, I don't see this addressing or hurting or changing anything long term. I think this is common sense stuff that can work right now. These are movies that the studios don't stand to make any more real money from in a theatrical release anyway, even if the theaters were still open. Now, where it gets interesting though, Rob, is what happens if we're still in this situation when Black Widow's supposed to come out? What happens then? I have nobody at Disney telling me this. This is just my own perspective and speculation as a fan. That could be right, could be wrong. I don't see Disney doing the same thing with a movie like Black Widow. I believe Disney would much rather put that on the shelf for another 4 or 5 months and then release it and make $400 million in the box office, $700 million at the box office, $1 billion at the box office, and then put it out on home streaming later. So I don't see this changing anything. But you never know. Because 3 weeks ago, I never would have thought we'd be in this position now. And yet here we are. So you never know. But I think, you're going to see a different scenario with the big movies. But Rob, the real interesting thing here, though, is Trolls. Trolls is right now not subject to the theatrical window because they've never opened in a theater yet.
Right.
And so it's very interesting to me that Universal would make the decision to put Trolls, so we're just going to release it when it is. Quite frankly, I've heard and felt no buzz for Trolls World Tour, so maybe they realized it as well. Maybe they realized it wasn't going to make a lot of money in theaters anyway, even though the first movie made over $300 million. And was a nice little win for Hasbro, by the way. Thank you, Hasbro, for providing half of my household income. I appreciate that. But I just don't see anybody talking about Trolls World Tour. So that's an interesting scenario there too. Anyway, Rob, listen, a lot of moving pieces here. The Universal stuff, Birds of Prey, The Gentleman, what's going to be happening that they're going to go with a day and date release with Trolls, even though no movie theaters are going to be open when they release it that way. Dude, this is a lot to take in. You sit back and take a look at this whole thing. What's your perspective on all this?
Well, it worries me. Obviously, we talked about on the show yesterday what the movie theater experience means to you and I think to a lot of people. I mean, who doesn't love going to the movies? But look, I think with Disney, they know they can make, like you just pointed out, 400, 500, 700, $1 billion off Black Widow in the theaters. They're not going to leave that on the table. They still want to get that money. They need to get that money. That's what their business is. So for the time being, I don't think the theatrical business is necessarily in danger of going away. Right now, the movie theaters aren't even open. So it's a moot point. So it's hard to gauge what's really going to happen. But I would say this. I still want to be able to see like Blumhouse movies in the theater. But I think that this could prove that, you drop in lower budgeted movies. And I think in a way, lower budgeted movies can play for a couple weeks. They have a big opening and maybe, because look, a movie like The Hunt, you saw it. For whatever it is, it's probably better seeing a movie like The Hunt in a theatrical setting with an audience than without an audience. Horror films or genre movies or movies like The Hunt, anything Blumhouse puts out, is always better to see with a crowd than not. But to expect a movie like that to stay in a theater for 6 weeks or 8 weeks might be a little unrealistic. So, like everything else in the entertainment business, this is an evolution. And it's something that we don't know where it's going to shake out or where it's going to end. But like everything else, you evolve or die. And I think that we're seeing sea changes happening. And especially, look, these sea changes were forced upon us by this situation that no one's ever seen before. But they're happening. And I don't think movie theaters are going to go away. But we've talked about how movie theaters are now providing spectacle, bigger movies. Like I saw the trailer for Soul, the new Pixar movie. That movie looks wonderful. I don't want to see that movie sitting by myself at home. It looks like that movie is going to make a lot of people cry. And I want to sit in a theater and see that Pixar movie. And I think as long as the studios are going to be delivering the big budget entertainments, whether it's a Bond film, whether it's a Fast and Furious movie, whether it's a Marvel movie, a Star Wars movie, a Pixar movie, whatever it is, the theatrical experience will stick around for that. However, for these other movies, like you said, let's say you spent a lot of money on a sequel to a movie like Trolls, but it's got no buzz. Do you put it out and let it fail? Or now you have an alternative. And in the long run, I've been thinking about this over the last 24 hours, it could be yet a new emerging alternate form of distribution for theaters or for studios to make their money back. And maybe I choose to believe that this might allow them to make more movies, just like we have a direct-to-video market or direct-to-streaming. Maybe making these direct-to-VOD or direct-to, their VOD premieres could be a new thing. And maybe that'll allow new talent or new movies to get made. I don't know, but I choose to believe, at least I hope, that this might be a positive. Maybe.
Yeah, it's shifting sand right now. It's so hard to see where things are going. I mean, look, you take you brilliantly bring up like Blumhouse, right? You look at a movie like The Invisible Man, and we go back to that studio head roundtable that is up on YouTube that Hollywood Reporter did,
right?
Which
is very much worth reading.
Oh, and just watching. You can watch it too, guys. If you have a chance to go and watch it, it is up on YouTube. You can go see it. It's fascinating. You should go check it out. But one of the things that the studio heads brought up during that thing is there's not a lot of money in VOD. There's actually not a lot of money in VOD. And you look at a movie like Invisible Man, a movie that Blumhouse made for $7 million. And I propose that if that had been a straight to VOD release, they would have made their $7 million back. I think they probably would have made their $7 million back. This thing made over $100 million in the box office. Over $100 million in the box office. And that continues to be the big hurdle, that there's just way more money to be made in the box office. Now, you can say right now that it makes sense for The Hunt and for The Invisible Man now to move over to that, and for Birds of Prey, because on one hand, everybody's at home right now. Because of the circumstances, everybody's at home. Everybody's looking for something new to watch. That's one thing. But guess what? Once this thing ends, not everybody's going to be at home anymore. And it's going to be interesting to see where it goes, because maybe it could be, as you're proposing, a new thing. Maybe this will be a new thing. I don't know. I think these are interesting times that are causing some interesting decisions to be made. And by the way, I want to clarify that the guy I spoke to did not confirm to me that the studios like Universal spoke and was in consultation with the theaters before making this announcement. But I've got to believe that they probably did. Like, these are the theatrical partners. They had to, wouldn't they?
I would think so. But you know what I was thinking, like you just said, it's a new thing. What you can do with this VOD model is if lower budget movies can come out, like a movie like Invisible Man, make $100 million on a $7 million spend, the theatrical release itself becomes marketing for the VOD release.
Yes.
When people after a short window, the theaters, it's like a hit and run. You come in there, you make a lot of money quickly. You don't have to leave that theater. You don't have to leave that movie in theaters where the audience is going to see it. It's front loaded anyway. They're going to go out the first week or two, see this movie. You piggyback the success of the theatrical onto your VOD release, and the theatrical success becomes the promotional engine that drives that VOD. And people realize, wow, I can go see it. You're going to get young people that want to take dates. You're going to people like ourselves that are genre fans that are going to go out and see these things because we know what the theatrical experience is like for a movie like this. But then, boom, it's on VOD and it's in the home. And the people that have heard about this movie but might not have been going out to a theater to see it, or horror fans that have young kids or whatever, they can't get out to the theater. Boom, they still get to see it, and it feels new and it feels fresh because they're getting it within the same amount of time they've been already reading reviews and already hearing word of mouth. So it is kind of a new thing, and it could be beneficial, and it could make VOD more viable than it already is. I don't know, but it sounds like it could be. You could put this to good use, and utilizing, with social media and everything that happens. These are evolving platforms that the traditional models can always be juiced and speeded up, or let's try something that we haven't tried before. So in a way, maybe this is a good thing in the long run for the industry.
Right. And we can't forget, too, that movies being made directly for VOD has always been with us. I mean, you can't go 5 minutes without seeing a DirecTV, now only exclusively in these direct-to-TV. So these have always been there. Could there be more of a shift? Maybe. It's something we really got to keep our eyes on over the coming weeks, especially once we start getting the current circumstances behind us. It's going to be really interesting. Question here is, guys, what do you make of all this? It's absolutely fascinating stuff. Jump down into the comment section below and let us know your thoughts. Okay, guys,